This is an ABC News special report.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Bruce. We're coming back on the air because President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelenskyy are holding their high-stakes meeting at the White House, joined by European leaders. President Trump hoping to make progress in ending the war in Ukraine after falling short of a ceasefire deal during the Alaska summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The president now suggesting you don't need a ceasefire to achieve a lasting peace deal. Zelenskyy, though, raising security guarantee concerns once the war is over. Just moments ago, President Zelenskyy signaling today's first meeting was positive. Take a listen.
But it was really good. And we spoke about very sensitive points. The first one is security guarantees. And we are very happy with President that all the leaders are here, and the security in Ukraine depends on the United States and on you and on those leaders who are with us in our hearts. They have been online before yesterday, and etc. So a lot of countries on the side of Ukraine, our people, and all of us want to finish this war, stop Russia, and stop this war. We spoke about it, and we will speak more about security guarantees. This is very important that the United States gives such strong signal and is ready for security guarantees. The second point, or maybe the first, humanitarian direction, very important to exchange all the prisoners in
Signs of progress there that they may be making some headway when it comes to those security guarantees. So let's get right to Chief Global Affairs Correspondent and anchor Martha Raddatz. And Martha, before we get to sort of the nuts and bolts there, just this remarkable image of President Trump, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy sitting with these European leaders around the table, because, of course, just last week when the president's one-on-one meeting with Vladimir Putin was announced, there was a lot of concerns from those same leaders in the room that they would be sidelined in these conversations.
Exactly, Mary. That was a powerful image. That is diplomacy on parade right there. And Zelenskyy had the backup of all those European leaders. And just to see them seated there together, and earlier just to see them standing side by side with Zelenskyy, with President Trump in the middle, leading the way, and reaching out to President Trump and saying, all these European leaders, it's so good we are all here together and with the United States. You also heard Zelenskyy talking about the positive things that came out of his meeting. He has clearly learned a lot about President Trump from that very first disastrous meeting last February. He's flattering President Trump. He is thanking President Trump, and he's going for the positive, the security. We were happy to hear about security. We're happy to hear about a possible prisoner exchange and releasing many Ukrainians, and talking about the children that have been abducted. So he is focusing very much on that. Very smart move on Zelenskyy's part, but certainly to have the power and the optics of that image of all those European leaders who came to be by his side, and also making a point to President Trump that a ceasefire is important, where just a few hours ago, President Trump said he did not think a ceasefire was important anymore, Mary.
And let's talk about that ceasefire, because that is a main sticking point here. The president, even though just days ago he was adamant that a ceasefire had to happen, now he's saying essentially he doesn't think it's necessary anymore. But of course, Martha, without a ceasefire in place, while these negotiations go on, Russia can and is continuing to attack Ukraine.
That's exactly right, Mary. And we both heard it there on Friday, that we were all so surprised when President Trump came out and said we don't need a ceasefire, and we're going on with trying to get this peace agreement, when it was clear that Vladimir Putin didn't want a ceasefire. And that is exactly what's happening. That is exactly the point. The European leaders and Zelenskyy want a ceasefire because these negotiations could take a long time. Peace agreements are hard. They're complicated. He said that again and again. And if you don't have a ceasefire before those peace agreement talks, then the killing will just keep going, Mary.
Thank you, Martha. And that is exactly what we are seeing in Ukraine. So let's get to our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, who is there in Kyiv. And Ian, of course, even just hours before this sit down here at the White House, we saw Russia continuing its attack. This time, civilians, of course, were injured and killed. But I also want to talk to you about what we heard just now about security guarantees. It seems they're making some progress there. Certainly, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy was sounding positive about that. And then we also heard from the president of the European Commission saying that they were discussing what she described as Article 5-like security guarantees, perhaps some kind of workaround, since Ukraine certainly is not a member of NATO.
Yeah, that's right, Mary. And just so we're clear for the audience, what does Article 5 like guarantees mean? Well, Article 5 is part of the NATO Charter, and what it means is an attack on one is an attack on all. In other words, what they seem to be saying is that the United States will join with European countries on the front line, essentially saying that if Ukraine is attacked again, they will come to its defense. And that's exactly what President Zelenskyy has been looking for. You're right. He seemed absolutely upbeat there. Martha called it diplomacy on parade. She's right. It was diplomacy on steroids. I can't remember seeing a scene like this with so many leaders gathered around the table at the White House, all in accord. However, as I've been cautioning, the devil is in the detail. President Trump seems convinced that Vladimir Putin is going to agree to this. But already today, we've heard from Maria Zakharova, who's a foreign ministry spokesperson inside Russia, saying that Russia will not accept any kind of Article 5 NATO involvement inside Ukraine. Remember, for Russia, that was the problem right in the first place. They felt that NATO was starting to encroach on its borders. So this phone conversation that's supposed to take place between President Trump and Vladimir Putin is going to be critical. Has President Trump got it right? Is that exactly what Putin said, or is the devil in the detail? But yes, if what we're hearing is right, and we need to be very cautious at this stage, because there have been a lot of false dawns. If it's right, then this is an absolutely critical moment. It sends a very positive signal to all Ukrainians here that perhaps the end of the war is in sight.
And Ian, you're exactly right. All of those leaders at the table upping the pressure, pushing for those security guarantees. But of course, you have to connect those dots back to Vladimir Putin. Ian, thank you. So let's take that question of what comes next to the White House to our senior political correspondent, Rachel Scott. And Rachel, the president, while perhaps sounding a bit more defeated than he did last week, he does seem still optimistic that he can find a way to get the three leaders, Putin, Zelenskyy, and himself, all at the table together.
And Mary, as you know, this has been the goal all along for President Trump. He wants to have this meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Zelenskyy and himself at the table. He said that he would be happy to be there if both sides want him to be. He has found himself in an incredible position where he is the one that has working as the liaison between President Putin and Zelenskyy, communicating with both sides back and forth. He has made it clear that after he wraps up his meetings today with these European leaders and these allies, he's going to get on the phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin to see how they move forward. The president pretty optimistic that this trilateral meeting could happen. All those leaders agreeing that there is a need for peace. But the question, of course, as we talk about this, how do they get there? I think it was striking to hear from the German chancellor at that table saying that he does not see how the next meeting happens without an immediate ceasefire before they start beginning these serious negotiations around peace. And then that question on security guarantees. The president saying that Europe may bear the brunt of that. Just how involved the United States will be, that's a big open question as of now, Mary.
And as you note, the president is shortly going to be picking up the phone, speaking with Vladimir Putin. We know you'll be following closely to learn what comes of that. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. I'll be back with the entire team for World News Tonight. I'm Mary Bruce in New York. See you soon.
This has been a special report from ABC News.